Hello, my name is Sydney, and today I come at you with another writing update. I think this is Them's Writing Words episode. I'm not even going to pretend like I know. So, it's June 7th, Thursday. Yesterday after work, of course I went to Barnes & Noble's because Barnes & Noble has just become my office away from home. Don't even be surprised at this point if I mention Barnes & Noble. Be surprised if I mention that I went somewhere else. I was there for probably like 4 hours, which is kind of crazy because it was after work. So I spent last month doing Camp NaNoWriMo for book 2, took a step back from that, and now this month and by this month I mean May, but you know, we'll stretch that into June. So I've been spending my time with Project Stormcloud. I'll link a couple of videos down below that talk about some of my more recent progress, such as the Camp NaNoWriMo vlog, and also Writing the Bad Beginning, which is the video I posted before this, but I talked a bit about where I was with this story in that video, so go check that out. But basically, I figured some stuff out with my plot, dove back in, and did a lot of the kind of bigger edits that I foresaw doing. Not anything hugely grand, but it's like I came up with an idea of how to maybe explain the plot, and so I have to insert a couple of scenes or tweak other scenes to kind of have that thread of the plot follow through. And then also some of the ideas that I did have, I ended up having to kind of discard or at least put aside for a little while because I started to realize that it was going to overcomplicate my draft. And in retrospect, because I've now finished those big major edits, that's what I finished doing at Barnes & Noble yesterday. I started to get to this point where I was like, I do not want to leave here until I finish this. So I didn't finish the draft. I should say that it's draft 5.5 because draft 5, when I started, it was a false start and I was not ready to start at that point, and I had already done like maybe the first 5 chapters. I think this was actually back in Them's Writing Words number 10, which I can also link down below, but there you can see my naivete of thinking I was ready to do this draft when I really wasn't. But yeah, so I totally lost my train of thought. Yeah, so I finished the big edits yesterday at Barnes & Noble. I haven't finished the draft, but I finished the big edits portion of the draft. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. I really do feel like I'm making progress towards the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I'm so close that I am starting to go blind. And I mean that in a lot of ways. Take that literally, take that figuratively. It's got so many layers. But I made a list of all the kind of steps that I need to take in this draft 5.5 edit. So, implement major edits to draft 5.5. Check. Implement excerpts from add-ins document, and what I have is the add-ins document. That's a document where, like in previous drafts, maybe I took out a line that didn't really fit, but I didn't want to get rid of that line because maybe I could use it somewhere else or in a different way, and so I copy and paste those lines or paragraphs or even sometimes entire scenes. I copy and paste those into a document called add-ins because they're things I can add into a later draft. So I went through that and I didn't end up finding anything that I wanted to put into the draft. What I actually found was a lot of things that I could have added, but they were largely redundant. Like the line sounded cool and all, but it repeated an idea that was already like, okay, the reader gets it. I don't need to throw it at them again. So check. Next is implement small details to draft 5. I really love the word implement. That's become my like editing buzzword, you know, implement this, implement that. All I'm doing is implementing stuff. Implementation. So implement small details. So that's like, you know, you've got the big picture plot things, but then you've got small details that might be like, you know, add in some details to grow this element of the world building or something. Yeah, just little really small things that don't affect the plot, but they make the scene feel a certain way, or they make the world building kind of come together a little better. So I haven't done that yet, but that is what I plan to do next. And I feel like the only way I can really do it is to like read through the entire draft from start to finish and like add in those little details. And also along with this step is like tweaking details that are going to be changed as a result of the major edits I just did. So like little things that maybe I would have to really search really hard for, or I didn't remember where that detail was. So those are some of the things I'm going to tackle when I sit down and read through the whole thing. This manuscript is like 400 pages. It's like 102,000 words, which is fine, but it's a little wordy in some places, so I've got to get that down to under 100K. So the next step, once I finish this, and I feel like this is going to take me probably a couple of weeks at least. And that's if I like devote a lot of time to it, which I don't know. I'm working a full-time job, you know, adulting and all that stuff. After this, I have to adjust the timeline. So the entirety of book 1 takes place in almost exactly 3 months, like maybe 3 months and a week. And so I had that timeline really solid after I wrote like the second or third draft. But then of course I've added in things and taken away things and I've tweaked things, and so the timeline has shifted quite a bit. I still want it to start and end at the same time, but like in terms of when certain events happen in the story, that's gonna have to shift probably like a few days or even just like a week. I don't anticipate that having too much trouble, but you know, you got to be real careful, because like a scene could be in the morning, but then all of a sudden you've changed something, so now it has to be at night, and you have to go and find every mention of like the time of day or whatever. After that, I have to update my style guide. So I have a style guide that I keep, which is for certain things like words I've made up, any words that need to be capitalized, anything that needs to be italicized, or you know, how to use a certain word so that way it's consistent throughout, like things like that. Like I have a running style guide for this story and for Pitchfork. So basically I need to update the style guide with all the new words I've created recently. And then also of course make sure that those kinds of things are consistent throughout the text, although that comes later in line edits, which is actually the next step after updating the style guide. So I really I know it's bad for the environment and all, but I really love printing out my stories. I don't do it often because I know it's bad for the environment, so I try to wait until my story is at a good point, or I'll print it out if like I'll print out like maybe a chapter if looking at on the computer has just become impossible, because sometimes you can't see things when it's on the computer. If you print it out, you can see a hard copy, you know, instead of typing you're like scribbling, and then that kind of like activates a different part of your brain. So like long story short, I don't print often. I like to wait until the draft is at a really solid point before I print it, and I can't wait. And this time I'm going to do one of those treat yourself stuff from Parks and Recreation, and I am going to take it to like Office Depot or Staples or something and have them print it so they can like bind it up real nice. I really want it to have like that tape binding, you know, so it can be like a real book. Except it's still like, you know, the 8.5 by 11 printer paper, but it's going to be bound. It's going to be so cool to like travel with or something, I don't know. Or even just to hold. But I feel like that could be really cool, like to do my line edits on, because then I could mark it up, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And then the step after that sort of probably may or may not come before or after the line editing thing. Like I might switch them, and that is to send it out to other readers or beta readers. So I'll probably like I have to find some. And then I also was like thinking of like going on Goodreads. I know they have like beta reader things on Goodreads and stuff, so I'll probably do that. And I'm just trying to figure out if I should like send it to them before I do the line edits or after. And depending on like at what point you are in the process, you know. In my particular situation, I'd like my beta readers to see a draft that, you know, is not polished per se, but maybe has a little bit of a buffer job done. Just so you know, they're not tripping over so many sentences, or I can just make it sound nicer before they get it. But I also don't want to devote so much time to line editing, then have them, you know, take it and give me feedback and stuff, and maybe now I have to change some scenes around, then I have to do line editing again. Like, it doesn't really make sense for me to do that, so I don't know, it just kind of depends. But I'll figure that out a little bit later down the line. And then the last step, which is, okay, so while they're beta reading it, at whatever point they end up beta reading it, I want to work on my query letter. So I think it was around January where I did this before. I wrote a draft of a query letter. Actually, I wrote like maybe 2 or 3 drafts and like tweaked them a bunch of times, and you know, started looking at some literary agents who I want to represent me, and I've got like 2 who are my top 2. I've got one who's my top 1, but then I've got a really close second, and then I've got some others who I think it would also fit really well with. This is the part that I'm actually most nervous about, because I feel like a query letter is like a cover letter, you know. It's like, here is this thing, love it. Here's what it's about, I want you to love it. You know, it's like when you send out a cover letter, it's like, here is me and my qualifications. Now let me spruce it up a bit and make it sound really nice and appealing and make me sound really qualified. hire me, you know? And then like you might send out like 10 or 20 query letters and you may not get anything back. And it's just like, ugh. But this is like somehow worse than sending out like cover letters and resumes and stuff. This is like sending out my heart. It's like, here, take this piece of my heart. I don't want to send it to my top people right off the bat, because I want to send it to some other people first, see how they respond to it before, because then if the query letter, you know, has some issues with it, I can make those changes before I send it to my top. So definitely have to do more research on this. But at the same time, I don't want to overthink the query letter, because overthinking the query letter, God knows I've overthought my cover letter so much. So long story short, apply to jobs that don't ask for cover letters. That's where I'm at right now. Any updates or whatever that come in terms of like writing tasks that I'm going to do after that, we're going to have to wait for the future. I don't want to start saying that I'm going to do stuff and then I'm not going to do it. But let's just say I am really eager to get back to Pitchfork. I say that, I'm probably going to look at it for like a week and then come back to Stormcloud. Thank you guys so much for listening. Down below, let me know where you guys are at with your writing projects. I'm really thirsty. My mouth is super dry. Give this video a like, hit subscribe, hit that little bell notification icon so you can be notified whenever I post new videos, and I will see you next time. Toodaloo! Body's coasting all these little babies.